Let's play a game called Where Did Your Future Go? Look at your pay stub. Look at the taxes deducted. Now imagine taking all that money, every hour of labor you sweated for, every road that wasn't fixed, every school lunch program that was cut, stacking it in a pile the size of a cathedral and setting it on fire. If you did that, you would still be about $100 million short of buying one B-2 Spirit. We are not talking about a fighter jet. We are talking about a flying bank run. The official price tag was $2.2 billion per unit. Adjusted for inflation, we are approaching a number that looks less like a budget and more like a telephone number. For the price of a single aircraft, you could have fully funded the cancer research budget for an entire decade. Instead, we bought a fleet of 21 bat-winged boomerangs that spend 90% of their existence sitting on the ground, burning money just by existing. They call it the Spirit, a fitting name, because much like a ghost, it is rarely seen, it terrifies people, and it sucks the life out of everything around it. On paper, the B-2 is the apex of human engineering. It is a stealth bomber designed to slip through Soviet air defenses like a needle through fog, deliver a thermonuclear apology, and return home for tea. It has the radar cross-section of a large bird. That is the selling point. We paid $45 billion so that on a Russian radar screen, the angel of death looks like a pigeon. But here is the punchline that nobody at the Pentagon wants you to hear. The most advanced weapon in history is defeated by moisture. I am not joking. The specialized, classified, radar-absorbent skin that makes the plane invisible is a chemical nightmare. It is so fragile, so temperamental, that if the plane flies through a heavy rainstorm, the stealth coating can degrade. We built the Wicked Witch of the West, a terrifying monster that melts if you throw a bucket of water on it. Because of this technological diva status, the B-2 cannot simply sit on a runway. Oh no, that is for peasants like the F-15. The B-2 requires a customized, climate-controlled, air-conditioned hangar everywhere it goes. We are literally building five-star hotels for airplanes while our veterans sleep under bridges. It requires roughly 60 hours of maintenance for every single hour of flight. Think about that ratio. That is not a weapon of war. That is a patient in intensive care. Technicians in hazmat suits have to apply specialized tape and glue by hand after every mission, smoothing out imperfections with the delicacy of a surgeon just so the plane doesn't accidentally announce its presence to the entire world. And the tragedy? It was built to fight a ghost. The B-2 was designed to penetrate the Soviet Union, but by the time the first B-2 was actually combat-ready, the Soviet Union was a memory. The threat was gone. A rational society would have said, "Great, we won, cancel the check." But the military-industrial complex does not speak the language of rationality. It speaks the language of sunk costs. Instead of canceling it, they rebranded it. They took a nuclear sledgehammer and decided to use it to swat flies in the desert. We have used this $2 billion stealth asset to bomb tents, trucks, and non-state actors who don't even have radar. It is the geopolitical equivalent of buying a Lamborghini to deliver Uber Eats. It works, sure, but it is a fiscal obscenity. We didn't buy a bomber, we bought a subscription service to Northrop Grumman. We bought a mesmerizing, beautiful black hole that eats tax dollars and defecates bureaucracy. But if you think the engineering was a scam, wait until you see the contract. You might assume that if a company builds a plane that literally peels apart in bad weather, they'd be forced to pay for the repairs, right? You might assume the law protects the buyer? Oh, you tragic, optimistic fool.
Welcome to the legal twilight zone, where competence is punished, failure is rewarded, and the taxpayer is legally obligated to say thank you while being mugged. To understand why the B-2 Spirit costs $2 billion a pop, you have to understand the specific type of contract used to build it. It's called a cost-plus contract. In the real world, where you and I live, if you hire a contractor to build a deck and he accidentally sets your house on fire, he doesn't get paid, he gets sued. But in the defense industry, if Northrop Grumman sets the budget on fire, the Pentagon doesn't sue them. The Pentagon brings more gasoline. Under a cost-plus agreement, the government agrees to pay for all the expenses incurred during development, plus a guaranteed profit percentage on top. Do you see the perverse incentive here? If the project comes in under budget and ahead of schedule, the corporation makes less money. But if the project is a disaster, if it requires years of redesigns, exotic materials, and endless troubleshooting, the costs go up. And since the profit is a percentage of the costs, the profit goes up. We literally incentivized them to fail. We wrote a contract that said, take as long as you want, make it as complicated as possible, and bill us for every mistake. But surely, you ask, Congress would stop this. Surely the Senate would look at this burning pile of cash and say, enough. My dear naive friend, the B-2 Spirit was not just engineered to evade radar, it was engineered to evade cancellation. This is a strategy I call political gerrymandering of the supply chain. When Northrop Grumman built this plane, they didn't just build it in one factory. That would be efficient. No, they deliberately spread the manufacturing of parts across 46 different states and 383 congressional districts. This wasn't logistics, it was a hostage situation. Every time a politician threatened to cut funding for the B-2, a lobbyist would walk into their office, drop a map on the desk, and say, "Senator, if you vote against this bomber, you are firing 500 people in your own district during an election year." The B-2 became unkillable. It wasn't a weapon system anymore. It was a federal jobs program wearing a trench coat. It didn't matter that the Soviet Union had collapsed. It didn't matter that the plane was a maintenance nightmare. Canceling the program became political suicide for nearly every member of Congress. And then came the death spiral. Originally, the Air Force promised to buy 132 of these bombers. Based on that number, the cost per plane was supposed to be manageable, around $500 million. High, but swallowable. But as the costs ballooned and the Cold War ended, Congress got cold feet. They cut the order from 132 to 75 and finally to just 21. Here is the basic economics lesson that the Pentagon ignored. The research and development costs were already spent, tens of billions of dollars. When you divide that massive sunk cost by 132 planes, it's expensive. When you divide it by 21 planes, the unit cost goes supernova. Suddenly, we were paying $2 billion for a single airframe. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy of waste. We cut the order to save money, which made the price per plane skyrocket, which made us look like idiots for buying them. But we couldn't stop buying them because the parts were made in the district chairman's backyard. So we finished the fleet. We popped the champagne. We patted ourselves on the back for maintaining air superiority. But while the lawyers and the lobbyists were counting their bonuses, the pilots and the mechanics were about to discover a horrifying truth. We had built the most expensive plane in history, secured by the most ironclad contracts in history. But we forgot to ask a very important question. What happens when you actually try to fly the damn thing in a real war?
Welcome to the operational reality of the B-2 Spirit, where the rubber meets the road, or rather, where the rubber melts, cracks, and requires a team of scientists to reapply it before we can go to war. If you thought the purchase price was the scandal, you were thinking too small. The purchase price is just the cover charge to get into the club. The real bankruptcy happens at the bar. The B-2 is a hangar queen. In the Air Force, that is a derogatory term for an aircraft that spends more time being repaired than flying. But the B-2 isn't just a queen, she is an empress. She demands tribute. Remember that magical, invisible skin, the radar-absorbent material that makes the plane stealthy? It turns out that maintaining invisibility is harder than maintaining a relationship with a narcissist. After every flight, every single time the wheels leave the ground, the aircraft returns with microscopic cracks and dings in its coating. This isn't like patching a tire. This is chemistry. Technicians have to crawl over the airframe, locate these imperfections, scrape them away, and then, I kid you not, apply new layers of toxic classified goop by hand. Then they have to wait. The material has to cure. It has to dry. You cannot rush it. You cannot heat it up too fast. You basically have to watch paint dry while a war is going on.
This creates a metric called mission capable rate. A healthy aircraft fleet should be ready to fly maybe 75% or 80% of the time. The B-2, it struggles to hit 50%. Half the time, the most terrifying weapon in our arsenal is grounded because its makeup is smudged. And because these planes are so delicate, we can't even base them near the war zone. We can't just park a B-2 in a dusty airfield in Iraq or a humid base in the Philippines. It would degrade. So where do they fly from? Missouri, Whiteman Air Force Base, in the middle of America. Do you understand the logistical insanity of this? To bomb a target in Afghanistan, a B-2 crew has to take off from Missouri, fly halfway around the world, refuel in midair multiple times, drop their payload, and fly all the way back to Missouri. These are 30, sometimes 40-hour missions, non-stop. The pilots are basically living in a cockpit the size of a minivan for 2 days straight, surviving on go pills, which is the Air Force's polite term for amphetamines, and microwave burritos, just to deliver a bomb that a drone could have dropped for 1,000th the cost. We are burning millions of dollars in jet fuel to commute to the war. It is the military equivalent of driving from New York to Los Angeles to buy a quart of milk. And then, in 2008, the system finally collapsed under its own weight. I want to introduce you to the Spirit of Kansas. It was one of our 21 precious bombers. On a humid morning in Guam, it taxied down the runway. Everything looked green. The computers said go. The pilots initiated takeoff, but there was a ghost in the machine. You see, the B-2 is a fly-by-wire aircraft. It is aerodynamically unstable. A human cannot fly it manually. A computer has to make thousands of micro-adjustments per second to keep it in the air. That computer relies on air data sensors to know how fast the plane is going and at what angle. But the sensors had gotten wet. Heavy rains in Guam had caused moisture to build up in the sensor tubes. The heating system designed to dry them out hadn't been turned on in time. So the sensors fed the flight computer garbage data. They told the computer the plane was flying level when it was actually pitching up. The computer, trying to be helpful, forced the plane to pitch up even harder. It literally wrestled control away from the pilots and drove the tail into the ground. The plane stalled. It crashed. It burned. In seconds, $1.4 billion of taxpayer money evaporated in a fireball. Both pilots ejected and survived, thankfully. But the investigation revealed the culprit: moisture. We built a machine so advanced it could outsmart the entire Soviet defense grid, but it was defeated by dew. And what did the Air Force do? Did they rethink the design? No. They issued a technical order telling mechanics to turn on the heaters sooner. This is the definition of the sunk cost fallacy. We are so deep in the hole we cannot climb out. We just keep throwing money at the problem, hoping that physics will eventually negotiate a surrender. But as we stand here in the wreckage of the Spirit of Kansas, looking at the ashes of $1 billion, we have to ask the final terrifying question, the one that nobody in Washington wants to answer. Does the B-2 actually work? I don't mean can it fly. I mean, in a world of hypersonic missiles, quantum radar, and cheap drones, is this $2 billion dinosaur actually capable of winning a modern war? Or did we just build the world's most expensive museum piece?
Here is the tragedy of military procurement. It moves at the speed of a glacier, while technology moves at the speed of light. The B-2 Spirit was designed in the late 1970s. Its stealth geometry, those sharp angles and smooth curves, was calculated using 1970s supercomputers that had less processing power than the smart fridge currently humming in your kitchen. It was built to defeat Soviet radar operating on specific frequency bands. But physics is a cruel mistress. In the 40 years since we designed this invisible bird, radar technology has evolved. We now have low-frequency radar arrays, multi-static systems, and satellite-based infrared sensors that can track heat signatures from space. The B-2 might be invisible to a specific type of outdated fire control radar, but to a modern, integrated air defense network, it's not a ghost. It's a very quiet, very expensive piñata. We are flying a 1980s concept into a 2020s reality. It is the tactical equivalent of trying to sneak into a hacker convention wearing a fake mustache. It might have worked in 1945, but today everyone can see you. And yet, we cannot upgrade the airframe. The shape is the shape. The physics are baked in. To fix the B-2's vulnerabilities, you would have to build a completely new plane. And oh, wouldn't you know it, that is exactly what they want to do. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce you to the B-21 Raider. The Air Force looked at the B-2, the cost overruns, the maintenance nightmares, the sensors that fail in the rain, and they said, we need a replacement. But they didn't say, let's stop building manned bombers in the age of drones. No, that would be logical. That would save money. That would bankrupt the lobbyists. Instead, they announced the B-21. And what is their sales pitch? I want you to listen closely, because it is the same lie they told us in 1980. They are promising it will be affordable. They say it will cost only $550 million per plane. They say it uses open architecture to be easily upgraded. They're literally selling us the B-2 again, but this time they promise they fixed the glitches. It is the iPhone strategy of national defense. The B-2 is the iPhone 14. The B-21 is the iPhone 15. It does the exact same thing, but the charging port is different and you have to buy all new accessories. This is not a defense strategy, this is a subscription model. The military-industrial complex has successfully gamified the budget. By the time the B-21 is fully operational in 2030, its technology will be obsolete, and Northrop Grumman will already be drafting the PowerPoint slides for the B-22. Let's descend from the clouds and look at the ground. Let's look at the deep pain. The total program cost for the B-2 Spirit, including development, procurement, and construction, was roughly $45 billion in 1990s money. Adjusted for inflation, we're talking about a program that cost the American people nearly $100 billion. What does $100 billion buy you? It could have rebuilt every crumbling bridge in the majestic state of Pennsylvania. It could have provided free college tuition for every single veteran of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. It could have revolutionized our mental health care system, preventing the 22 suicides a day that plague our returning soldiers. But we didn't do that. We took that wealth, the stored labor of 2 generations of American workers, and we turned it into 21 aluminum bats that we keep in a humidity-controlled closet in Missouri. And for what? To bomb goat herders in mountains who don't have electricity, let alone radar. We are using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut, and we are charging the walnut to the credit card of our grandchildren. So what is the verdict on the B-2 Spirit? Is it a technological marvel? Absolutely. It is a masterpiece of aerodynamics. It is beautiful, it is terrifying. But is it a weapon? No. A weapon is a tool you use to win a war. The B-2 is a totem. It is a religious idol constructed by a bureaucracy that worships complexity and fears accountability. It exists to justify the budget, to employ the constituents of powerful senators, and to perpetuate the myth that American security can be bought if we just write a big enough check. The B-2 is the ultimate stealth aircraft, not because it is invisible to radar, but because it made $100 billion of public money vanish without a trace. It flies over a country, drops nothing, and the enemy's economy collapses just from trying to build a defense against it. Sadly, it did the exact same thing to us first.